Hello, Buckeyes. This is Matt, the Carmen, Ohio Buckeye, and today I'm here to discuss the upcoming Ohio State football game. I have actually invited some friends to join along. I'm not sure if they will or not, but if they do, they are certainly welcome. And today is a great day for all Buckeye fans. Today we're preparing ourselves for the very first game day kickoff. So this is the eve of that. There will be some football games tonight, and actually I had picked 4 games yesterday, and after placing my bets in, I actually made $100 off of those games. Not every day's like that, but it was great to be right. I've always found that the beginning of the season is always easier to get games right in than you know mid-season, late season, especially the fact that there's tougher games to pick from, and there's a lot of games that could go either way. So I am excited about this season. I do have a lot of hopes for our football team, and hopefully discuss that. I'm just trying to give myself a little bit of time to make sure that my friends can join along. So if you bear with me here. I appreciate your patience with me. um, I told them it would be sometime between 12 and 1, and I had some technical issues. So I was trying to make sure that I got everything correct, and I also want to make sure that you can hear people, which somebody will have to be watching the stream to know for sure. But once they join in, or if they join in, we can discuss a little bit about our pregame aspirations. And this season, 2025, a lot happened during this off season. Ohio State, they made a lot of changes, and also there's a lot of rule changes that will affect the way we operate as a team. And the fact that we have more accountable coaches than ever is a huge deal. So I do expect that there's going to be a lot of differences in the way our offense runs. Ryan Day has always called our offense since he's been our head coach back in 2019. And now it's going to be Chip Kelly making the calls. And I do believe, and a lot of people ask this question, and I'll probably ask people if they do join in, some of my friends, do you think that, Ryan Day is going to, actually fully give the reins in, or if he's going to be heavily involved in the offensive play calling? But part of the reason I personally believe that he's going to allow that to happen is because we have actual data to show that he did that with Jim Knowles. Ryan Day did not know the defense well enough to make those calls, and he decided to give full reins in and let Jim Knowles call the defense, and you could see an instant change in the results. And because of that data, I think Ryan Day is more willing than ever to allow that to happen. And that's why I do think that Ryan Day will actually give the reins over. And of course, I'll ask my friends, if they join in. Some of my friends are actually kind of connected a little bit more than I am. Like I said, this is a fan channel. I hope to discuss every game this season, and I also hope that we see a lot of great moments with some of the young Buckeyes that'll be stepping in the place of, some players that left. Not many players left last season. Like I said, we have a full reign of players that came back for this year. So, and just going over our roster too will be an interesting thing to discuss as well. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is we have a very young wide receiver. Of course, most people are under the impression that we lost our best wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr., and that will be much easier to cover. Of course, Emeka Egbuka, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate are all wide receivers that, on their on their own, I believe can actually hold their own and cause a lot of fits for defenses by themselves. And but none of them are necessarily Marvin Harrison level. Although Brandon Ennis and Carnell Tate, I don't think that we've really seen their full potential yet. With Kyle McCord, it's just Kyle McCord was so hyper focused on Marvin Harrison Jr. that I feel like he somewhat ignored other players. Either that or he had trouble reading defenses, and the minute that he had any questions or issues, he would look straight for Marvin Harrison Jr. And I know for a fact, based on the practices we've seen, based on what we've heard, just through the grapevine, based on some shows that I watched that are pretty connected to what's going on with the team, that Marvin Harrison Jr., uh, you know, that was an aberration in the fact that we had a player that only looked for him. I believe that Will Howard will be, different than Carl McCord in that he'll distribute the ball to other players, and that's high. That's way more deadly than just looking for your most talented player all the time. Yeah, I mean that'll carry you through like in games where you have better football talent, and they're not going to be able to cover that all the time. They'll shut it down sometimes, as we saw throughout the season. But a team like a Purdue, a team even like a Penn State, they're going to focus in. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is just that good of an athlete that even if they're focused on him, he's going to find open lanes. Even against Michigan, who there's no contention, regardless of what you think of the scandal, Michigan was the top-rated defense in the country, and it showed when we played them. But even against them, Marvin Harrison had upwards 150-plus yards. And, after the game, they were bragging, saying that they shut him down, but the statistics don't say that. Like, you're just going to have to let a guy like that beat you a little bit and try and shut everyone else down. And I think that's the way that I'm sorry, that's the way that most teams operated when they faced us. They tried to just shut everyone else down, and sometimes that at least stalled us a little bit. But if you don't have the dogs to stop us an entire game, by the fourth quarter, we're going to end up exposing a team if they don't have the people to cover. So this year we have a guy by the name of Jeremiah Smith stepping in, and Jeremiah Smith is a true freshman. So like it's very rare. I think Chris Carter maybe, yeah, Chris Carter was the one starting as a true freshman. I don't think anybody else has stepped in the way that Chris Carter has at that level. Besides, maybe coming in for a few plays, maybe coming in during garbage time against teams that never stood a chance. You don't usually see that happen. So, so the Buckeyes have a rare opportunity to feature a guy, and they have said, we've heard through the grapevine that they have said they are going to feature him. We don't know how much, but we're hearing he might be a starter, and we're hearing he's that good. We haven't really had much time to really see how good he is. People that have been to practices are ranting and raving about him. Of course, our Buckeye beat, they're going to rant and rave. That's just how they are. So until pads meet each other and people are hitting each other in the trenches, and wide receivers are trying to juke the defenders to get open, we don't know what really is going to happen. Akron ain't really going to tell us much. So while I'm waiting, I don't know if anybody's going to join me. If they don't join me today, I do have it worked out a little bit better. So next time I can get started a little sooner. But so for more important games, we can definitely chat with some people. But tomorrow is kickoff, Akron at Ohio State, so they're coming to the Horseshoe. Akron does not have enough in their roster to even come close to beating us. So that's not, what Buckeye fans are concerned about. When it comes to games like this, of course, we're happy to see the Buckeyes take the field. We're happy to get the chance to see them play. We're all excited about that. but we have to look for things, look for things that potentially, could decide the season, and by looking for those things, break down, like this could be a problem when we play against this or that team. But we start off the season again with Akron coming to Ohio State. Akron is a MAC school, I believe. Yeah, they're a MAC school, and they don't get the athletes we do. So coming to Ohio State obviously is a chance for them to get a little bit of money to fund their athletic programs, and that's why we do games like this. Really, that game is a name your score game. Ohio State can score as much or as little as they choose to, and that just depends. Like if we're up 49-3 or 49-0 or something like that at halftime, we're going to pack it in, and we're not going to show everything. But I do know that when it comes to games like this, what you want to do is put stuff on the tape that's going to give other teams something to worry about. And so, we fully expect Chip Kelly to use a lot of combinations of things to make it really confusing for other defenses. Like when they show this formation, they ran this time and this that time, but we don't know if they're going to run something else out of it because there were options, read options, this, that, and the other. So we fully expect Chip Kelly to do a lot of that tomorrow. Chip Kelly, as you know, former Oregon coach, former Philadelphia Eagles coach, he has head coaching experience. Having NFL and college football experience is a big plus. He has a lot of insight that he can help Ryan Day with. He already has coached Ryan Day in the past, including when Ryan Day was an actual player. So, they have a long history together. So we're going to see how that translates on the field. So that's very exciting because based on what we saw in the spring game, we saw a lot more of those, like read options. We saw a lot of movement. We saw, misdirection and things that like would move one direction and the play goes the other. So that should help confuse defenses, because it felt stale under Ryan Day since 2019. 2019 was different. Like everybody knew Urban Meyer, but they didn't know Ryan Day, so they didn't know what to expect. But since then, it's and I do give Kevin Wilson credit. He was a great coach. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of times our offense was stale. You knew C.J. Stroud was mostly going to pass. You knew that he wasn't going to run the ball even if he did the option play. Everybody knew that. You knew that the way our wide receivers would line up, that it's probably going to be a run play. So, teams would figure that out. And you would see a lot of plays where our running back would run to a lane and there would be no blocking in front of him. And, that would shut it down a lot of times for big moments. And it's just a lot of schematic issues. So Ryan Day, as a head coach, he knows the passing game, but he doesn't really have a lot of experience coaching the run game, and so he needed good help on that. And Tony Alford wasn't quite getting it done, so it was time for him to move on. And I don't know. Tony Alford may be successful at Michigan. He may be better, prepared for that kind of thing, but he wasn't the right guy for the job, and I think this offseason shows that he wasn't the right guy, and it's not typical that we see a coach leave Ohio State and go to Michigan, and that's not something that we like as fans, and so when we see that, it boils our blood. So, but at the same time, it's like Tony Alford missed on so many players. It may not be as bad of a situation as a lot of people originally thought it might be, because Tony Alford being gone, we think that we've actually replaced him with a better coach, a coach that had started being a running back coach at Oregon just recently. And Tony Alford, so many times we lost a lot of good players we were after to lesser competition, And a lot of people are like, well, that's an Ohio State problem, but is it? Like, because he goes to Michigan and they lose play a running back to Kentucky right away, and we're just like, well, we've seen this before, so we're starting to think that it really was a him thing and not an Ohio State thing. But coming in to replace our running backs coach Tony Alford, we have Carlos Lachlan. Like I said, he was coach at Oregon, so that adds an interesting dynamic to this season. A lot of people are anticipating Oregon as being our biggest game, and I already said in my last video how I feel about Oregon, but most of the experts aren't echoing what I have to say. So we'll see what kind of difference it is in the run game. But there were a lot of strange decisions when Tony Alford was our football coach. Namely, the strangest ones was, Dallin Hayden just recently left for Colorado. There were so many times that we had Trayvon Henderson out, or a player like him, and strange players were filling in for him. They were decent players, but they weren't like the kinds of running backs that you're worried about preparing for. Bear with me 1 second here. Sorry about that. But as far as the season goes, I'm just going to go over who we're playing and what I think will happen with that game. Akron, we will have no problems with, and we'll get to feature players like a Jeremiah Smith. I'm not sure if he's going to fully be a starter right away. I mean, he is a true freshman. A lot of people are saying he will. So that's one thing we'll be looking for tomorrow. Our second game, Western Michigan's coming to town. It's much the same as the Akron game. So, we'll get a good opportunity to break in our quarterback, Will Howard. And that's Saturday, September 7th. Strangely, that game is a primetime game. I'm not exactly sure why. It seems like Fox does things backwards from the way ESPN does. So, for some reason, we're playing them at 7:30 at night. Regardless of when we play them, it's going to be full out a blowout. So, I mean, there's no doubt that that team has no chance against us. Marshall, the Thundering Herd, are coming to town. We'll actually have a bye week in between those two games, which I'm not happy about. We should have our bye weeks in between, like smaller games. When we play Michigan State and Iowa, it would be nicer if we had a bye week, between those games, or between Iowa and Oregon, somewhere in between there. Instead, we have it in between Western Michigan and Marshall. But the Thundering Herd have had some history as a football program. They've had seasons where they've made some upsets. Just 2 years ago, they was it Marshall? Yeah, it was Marshall that beat Notre Dame. Actually, the game after we played them. Now, Marshall, when they upset Notre Dame, like I said, it was the week after. So a lot of times when two physical teams play each other, the game after that, there's a bit of a struggle, and that has a lot to do with there's a difference in the level of hard hits that come from good teams, and Ohio State is known to be a hard hitting team. So, I don't know that you can take much away from that upset. Just that Marshall played a really good game and won that game. Plus, Notre Dame had some quarterback issues that day. So, I would figure that Marshall would be another blowout. Maybe not as big a blowout as Akron and Western Michigan, but definitely a big blowout. So, the first three games we're gonna win with no problem. So we'll be 3-0 going into our first Big Ten opponent. So Saturday, September 28th, we'll be playing Michigan State. Now this will be a road game. It'll be our first road game of the season. So of course, road games are always more challenging than home games. But Michigan State is another team that's kind of unknown. Part of the reason that they're an unknown is they transitioned to a new head coach. That head coach has done pretty well. In other arenas, but it's one thing to be good outside of like Power 4 Well, we're Power 4 now. It used to be Power 5, but it's a whole other thing to be good in a Power 4 conference. So, like I said, that's a complete unknown. So we don't know, what we'll see from Michigan State. We do know that the last two seasons they've had one of the worst defenses in passing, especially in the Big Ten, but also one of the worst just in college football in general, and that doesn't bode well for them against our offense. So my prediction is that game will not be close by any stretch. So Ohio State will win by a wide margin, and of course be 4-0 going into the Iowa game. Iowa is going to play us on October 5th. They're coming to the Horseshoe. Iowa always figures to have a really good defense, but part of the problem that Iowa has had in recent years is that their offense has been so bad that their defense is on the field the entire game. We saw in the bowl game against, I believe they played Tennessee last season, that by halftime they were just so wore out. The athletes of Tennessee, just blew them off the field in the second half. And that's kind of what you expect. Now, they did hire a new offensive coordinator, and a lot of times that can immediately make a bit of a difference. But even if, Iowa's offense is 200 times better, or I shouldn't say 200 times, 200% better than what it was, it's still not enough to keep up with our offense. I think the game will be a little closer just because Iowa slows the game down. But I think, there'll be, a good solid double-digit difference in the score. Iowa doesn't really have what it takes to beat Ohio State, especially in the Horseshoe. It would really take a down game for that to happen. And of course, Ohio State will be wanting to be prepared for the Oregon game. So I just don't see them overlooking Iowa. I know that Oregon is a big game, but a conference opponent is easy to get up for, and that's what I expect to see out of them. All right, and then the following game is our first big game of the season. We will be 5-0 going into that game already, and I don't see us any chance that we lose our first 5 games. So when they get into that game against Oregon, we will be traveling to Oregon, which is the first time we've been in that stadium. This is the big game all of the experts have circled. Oregon did have a really good quarterback that got drafted in the NFL, and a lot of times you're like, well, they're replacing a quarterback. That's a huge problem, so a lot of times it's an unknown. But with Oregon, they brought in Dylan Gabriel. Whether no matter what you think of Dylan Gabriel, he has big game experience. He was involved in that Texas upset last year. He was a quarterback for the Oklahoma Sooners. So he does have game time experience. He has big game experience. And them being at home, they're definitely going to be up for that game. So, when it comes to what I think about Oregon, it doesn't matter what I say because obviously the season will show us for sure. But what I think of Oregon is that even though they're probably the most physical Pac-12 school coming into this season, they're not physical to a Big Ten level. So there's going to be a bit of a shock in the way that the Big Ten operates. I've always said the Big Ten, it's not about the fact that you play Wisconsin. It's not about the fact you play Nebraska. It's not about the fact you play Iowa. But it's the fact that you play all of them. You might play some of them in a row, and then you play, a Penn State or a Michigan, and those teams are very physical. So the wear and tear that happens really builds up from game to game, maybe even exponentially. And that's why upsets happen with these physical teams because, they're big dudes like coming in and, blocking them is it's physical and it takes its toll throughout the season. And the Pac-12 doesn't operate that way. It's a very offensive league. Well, it was before it pretty much disbanded. There's 2 teams left in the Pac-12, so I guess it's the Pac-2. I don't really know how they're gonna handle that, but it's not the same level of physicality. And without that level of physicality experience, Oregon will have a bit of a shock, I think. Now, as far as how their schedule lines up, let me take a look at Oregon's schedule. Sorry, give me a second. Oregon football schedule. So let's see. So they start off with Idaho, then they play Boise State, then they actually play their rivals Oregon State, and then Oregon will play UCLA, which is another new Big Ten team, and then they'll play Michigan State. Now we will have one common opponent the week leading up to our game against them. So I don't know how much that'll tell, because again, Michigan State is one of those teams that they're going to have some changes under a new coaching staff, and they're probably going to have a little bit of a tough time this season, while they transition, learning the new playbook and this, that, and the other. So I think Oregon, like I said, I think they're the most physical of the four teams that are coming to our league. They're more physical than traditionally you remember them. Like when we played them in the national championship game, they were not the most physical team. They were more of a finesse team, and that has changed quite a bit, especially defensively. Oregon does like to run in the trenches, but what they do struggle with is a physical team, and you have to be able to beat Oregon with the pass. That's true. Like when I say finesse, they do give up some yards in the passing game. So they are going to try and key in on our running game, and they did a good job of that back in 2021. So I imagine the strategy is going to be similar, even though it's a different coaching staff. But just analyzing what you will see out of Oregon, you expect them to have a pretty good offense. Oregon, with Dylan Gabriel and their wide receivers, they're definitely going to try and pass the ball quite a bit. And Ohio State, really, just looking at them, they've actually given up more yards to teams that have decided to run at them than pass at them. And we make way more stops when you go after our strength, which is our defensive backfield. It's not that our run defense is bad. It's just that's where you have to attack us. And Oregon should have one of the better running backs in the Big Ten, so they're going to try and test us there. But we're just really too physical for them up front. And so even if they have a little bit of success in the first quarter, I don't see it happening. Like Oregon, they will have home field advantage. That does help some. And again, it will be our first time going, out to their stadium. But Ohio State has too many weapons. We have too many good players on defense. I trust our defense to stop their offense way more than their offense to stop our defense. I do believe that unlike last season, we're going to create way more turnovers this year. So I foresee Ohio State beating Oregon, and a lot of the experts disagree with me, but I think they will beat Oregon. And this is going to be a special year for Ohio State, in my opinion. To give a little bit away, but Oregon, it just doesn't have the dogs to play with our team. We've added too much this offseason to strengthen. Even Travion Henderson himself is an imposing running back, and he made a lot of plays happen himself, even when our blocking schemes weren't great. But this year we have Quinshon Judkins, who was one of the top running backs in the SEC. So stopping our run game will be difficult for Oregon, even though they are more physical than they used to be. So yeah, I think Ohio State wins. I think that it will be maybe like a 10-point victory, or basically 2 scores. It'll be close enough throughout the game. I think we'll pull away late, even though it'll be in Oregon. I see us going 6-0 going into the Nebraska game. Nebraska is another interesting team. They're coming to the Horseshoe on October 26th. Nebraska is an interesting team because they did bring in a new coach a few seasons ago, and he is a good coach, but they were awful last year, and they didn't have a good quarterback on their sideline, The fact that they brought in a top quarterback, he will be a true freshman this year. Uh, Coaching staff football. I'm going to look up something real quick. But anyways, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. His name's Matt Rule. He does have a good history. He actually has NFL experience. Although his last bit of time in the NFL did not go well. I think he was the Carolina Panthers head coach. It, but I don't think that you can really blame Matt Rule. I think there's a huge problem with the way that teams run in general, just by their owner and everything. So Nebraska did not have a quarterback last year. Sims was a bust, and they tried to bring in other quarterbacks. It just didn't work. Their offense couldn't get out of their own way. Their defense was tired by the second half every game. They did bring in a guy by the name of Dylan Raiola, and just to throw accolades, Dylan Raiola was actually highly recruited by our team, but he ended up originally he chose Georgia. Strangely, he decided to pick Nebraska over both us and Georgia. I'm not exactly sure why. I do think he has someone in his family on the coaching staff, or had. I don't know if he's still there. I would have to. I don't really know. I'm not going to really look that up right now, but I'll probably break that down when it's closer to game time. But Dylan Raiola will probably win the starting job, so he'll probably be the starter as long as he's healthy. Him being a true freshman, it'll be very difficult for him to face an Ohio State football team who has a lot of senior leadership this year, and try and beat us in our home. Nebraska may be a much better team because, based on Matt Rule's history, his teams usually are way better in their second season. But way better could mean a lot of things. Nebraska might be a way better team, but they're not going to come into the horseshoe with a true freshman starting quarterback and knock us off. There's no way that'll happen. So Nebraska is not going to beat us. So I do see us going 7-0, getting ready for another big game. It's good that game is sandwiched in between the two games, or it could be bad. I don't know. I guess some might say we might not be ready, but Ryan Day has a history of getting us ready for even the smaller games. So our team hasn't laid an egg in those games under Ryan Day. So I'm believing that'll continue. So the following week, November 2nd, we'll be facing off against Penn State. Currently, Penn State's ranked number 8 in the country. I do believe Penn State is a really good team. They do have a big game Saturday, tomorrow, against West Virginia. So we'll see how that shakes out. Their quarterback last year was a true freshman, just like I mentioned with Nebraska. And, I believe that I'm right in saying this, but Nebraska, Penn State will have the same problem Nebraska will, or had the same problem that Nebraska will, in that he didn't look good. Drew Aller came in with a lot of hype, and it's really hard to come in as a true freshman in college football and try and read the defenses, make changes at the line, shift the line blocking protection, and do all of that. And as a freshman, you're still trying to get things down. The game hasn't completely slowed down for you, and I'm sure as the season goes along, it does. But Drew Aller now has that behind him. The game should be slowed down for him, and they brought in a new offensive coordinator. I believe they hired him from Kansas, who was a very high-scoring team last season. So I think their offense will be better. A lot of people have analyzed Drew Aller and given up on him. I'm not so much in that category. I think Drew Aller will be a tough quarterback to defend this year. I don't know that Penn State has the wide receivers you would hope to have, but I think Drew Aller will be a much better quarterback this year. I think he'll improve quite a bit. I think another off season with that experience in mind will help him know what he needs to work on, and I believe that he did work on a lot this off season. So Penn State is the first team that could potentially upset us, in my opinion. And like I said, I know the experts disagree with me that that Oregon's going to be the one, but honestly, like going to Beaver Stadium, and is a very tough thing to do. Ohio State has a very good record in Beaver Stadium. As a matter of fact, most of the time that Penn State has upset us, it's actually been in our stadium, which is strange, but it's true. But that doesn't mean anything for this game. I don't buy into that history thing. Like Penn State is their own team this year. We're our own team. Anything can happen. So if I was going to pick a potential upset, it would be Penn State. It wouldn't hurt as much as it would have last season or the year before. So I'm not thinking that we'll lose this game. I think we'll pull away in the fourth quarter. I think it will be a one-score game. I could be wrong. It could be worse than that if our team really takes off. But Penn State will be the most trouble we've had in a while. So they're going to give us the hardest game as far as until the final game against Michigan. Penn State will be tough physically. They'll be a very good defense. They'll be solid. They'll have the home crowd behind them. We had struggled with them 2 years ago in their stadium. There's a lot of things that they do, like in the stadium. There's like noises that blast over their speakers. I don't know how that's legal, but that's what Penn State does in their stadium, and they're going to do it again, especially against us. I do not believe that's going to be a whiteout game for some reason. Fox likes the big noon matchups as instead of prime time, so they'll probably put us against them at noon, which is fine. The whiteout is a tough environment, but yeah, Penn State. I'm calling them our first potential upset, not Oregon. I don't think Oregon will upset us, but Penn State could. I don't think they will. I think we'll win a close game against them, even in their stadium. And we'll have two big road victories, which will reflect really well on us when we go into playoff picks. They'll look at that very favorably. So we'll scoot by Penn State and be 8-0 going into the game against Purdue. Purdue will be November 9th. They are coming to the Horseshoe. Purdue is also, and I'm sorry, I need to look this up. They're also under a new coach. This will be his second season. His name is Ryan Walters. Ryan Walters had a very tough first season as a coach. Purdue had a losing record, which every year the odds against Purdue having a good record are against them, stacked against them, especially in the West. The West is kind of a bit of a circus, but it doesn't exist anymore. So they'll have a different type of schedule. Purdue had Hudson Card as their quarterback. I believe he's back. He was okay, but like I said, the team wasn't very good. We don't really know what we're going to expect out of Purdue, but Ryan Walters is not going to have a magical team this year. They haven't made a ton of changes, so they're going to be, I think, pretty much the same type of team. Even with the players that they have lost. We will get to know a lot more about Purdue in September 14th, the second game. They do play Notre Dame, so that'll tell me a little bit more because I don't really know a lot about Purdue. But under Ryan Walters, I don't think they're going to get it done. I don't think they're going to be good this year. I think Ohio State will have a double-digit victory, especially in the Horseshoe. We have had a history of having trouble with them. That was under better coaching staffs than they have now. So I figure that Ohio State will win by double digits at home against Purdue. I don't think it'll be a problem. It's not sandwiched into between two big games like Nebraska is. So I don't think I think we'll coast through that game and coast to 9-0. The following week, Ohio State will be playing the Northwestern Wildcats. We're going to Northwestern again. I don't understand it. We went to Northwestern 2 years ago, and now we're going back there. We didn't play them last year, so I really have no clue why. Why are we going back there, Big Ten? That's weird. But nevertheless, going to Northwestern is generally a bad experience. But this year it's going to be played in actually a baseball stadium. So it'll what is it, Wrigley Field, I think it is, we're going to, because they are an Illinois team. So that's different. Wrigley Field's a big stadium and has a lot of history with the Chicago Cubs. So I Northwestern was a surprise team last year. The thing about Northwestern is they don't bring in the 5-star athletes that we have. So on paper we should blow them out. But Northwestern has a history, and even though they have a new coach, I believe he's pretty much a student of Pat Fitzgerald, and last season kind of proved that. He turned a team that was picked to be just dreadfully terrible, and he brought them to a bowl game, and they won their bowl game against a team, a Utah team that everybody thought would coast away to victory pretty easily. And so, congratulations to Northwestern on last season, by the way. Nobody thought that they would be good enough to do anything. That's a huge deal. They're a small school, like I said. They don't get the 5-star talent. And so, Northwestern, they were really good last year for, as far as exceeding expectations. I don't know that they can repeat that. This coach, again, he took over for Pat Fitzgerald when he was fired a lot sooner than we would have expected. But yeah, under this new coach, there's a lot to be seen. Going to Wrigley Field feels like a bigger experience. It's easy to overlook Northwestern because their actual field has looked like basically a high school field with a high school locker room, and a lot of times our team would fall into the trap of not getting up for the game because it's not the best experience. Like going into those locker rooms reminds you of a high school. Their field is tiny. There's barely any fans in the stadium that are Northwestern fans. It's hard to get up for that game. Going to Wrigley Field, on the other hand, that's a big deal. Ohio State will be up for a game in Wrigley Field because it's a special place to play. I think we will win by double digits against Northwestern. I think they'll play us hard in the first half. They usually do. I think in the second half they won't have the wheels to continue. They'll be tired. So I don't think that'll be tough. We'll be 10-0, and that'll be going into the Indiana game the following week, November 23rd. I forgot to mention. I'm sorry, guys. In between Oregon and Nebraska, we'll have another bye week. So our 2 bye weeks will be gone by this time. So Indiana is a game to be concerned about because it's before the big game. Ryan Day obviously has struggled against Michigan, and going into the Indiana game, we have to be focused in that game because Indiana figures to have a really good defensive unit. Something that's really surprising, and Indiana's not ranked by any means, but Indiana did add a lot of talent this offseason. They figure to actually be a much tougher team than you'd expect. And I'm not saying Indiana's going to upset us, but when you got a big game the week before, we've seen it with Michigan the past 2 seasons. I believe they played Maryland last year, and the year before they played Illinois. Whenever you have a big game coming up, this game is one of those games that could be a trap game. And I'm not saying Indiana is going to beat us, but you saw it last season. Opening week, of course, we now have the defensive coach that was able to know our game plan. He actually transitioned from Indiana to Ohio State, and that's a big deal. But Indiana has a good defense, and I don't want to see our team overlook this team. I don't think it'll happen because it's in the horseshoe, but we do have to be careful. And I do think Indiana will be a bowl team this year, which is very rare. Oh, I'm sorry. I have some cleaners cleaning my house, and if you hear that, I apologize. But Indiana will be a very, very tough team compared to how they usually outplay. So I expect us to win this game. I think it'll be a little tighter than Vegas originally intends it to be, at least in the first half. I do not think that Indiana will upset us, but Penn State and Indiana, to me, are the 2 teams to look out for. It's very strange to say, but a game before Michigan is the potential game where we could get upset. So we do need to be careful. Lastly, Ohio State will be playing Michigan. Right now, Michigan is ranked 9th. Michigan lost a lot. Now, I don't care what the Michigan fans say. what they lost is not a hurdle they'll be able to get over this year. They lost their entire coaching staff. The only guy remaining is Sharon Moore. They did have some holdovers from Jim Harbaugh's staff that actually they were either fired or left or whatever. So they don't have anyone else. Most of the people were like GA or quality guys last year, so they've been promoted. That generally does not work out. You have to bring in bigger names. Their defensive coach has a track record of being pretty decent. However, he did have to leave the NFL because he was fired. So he did not do well in the NFL these past few seasons. So him coming in, it's hard to say that Michigan is going to be what they were. Sharon Moore's not experienced. He's not Jim Harbaugh. I don't care what anybody says. History dictates that an offensive line coach slash offensive coordinator who, he was promoted to that, but it was likely in name only, is not going to be able to take over the head coaching job and immediately look exactly like Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, it's true. Michigan's offense isn't complicated. Run left, run right, pitch out, zone read, then an occasional pass. That's their offense. Everybody knows that. They're in the middle of a huge scandal. They lost their entire offensive line. Their quarterback that's likely going to start is like a dollar store Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And their best running back left, and the running back that they have, Donnie Edwards, he did have a good season 2 years ago, but last year he had like 3.4 yards per carry. Their best wide receivers last season. They do have a lot returning on defense. They did lose some players, but their defensive line is going to be really good. There's no doubt about it. But just think about this. Their recruiting has been terrible. They haven't ever really had the best recruiting. They do a lot of like development of defensive line players, which they start out as 3-stars. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of 3-stars that are in the NFL that have had a very successful career. And Michigan has had a lot of really good 3-stars that have developed into something much better than what they were originally rated. And Michigan does still have that on their team. It's already been developed under Jim Harbaugh, so that will help them. But, like I said, a changing coaching staff will change a lot about defensive philosophy. Even if they're like, well, we're going to continue doing what Harbaugh does, they're not going to be able to do it exact same. Even though Sharon Moore was a great offensive line coach, being a head coach and still trying to take on certain duties throughout the team it's a huge difference. A lot of really good offensive coaches have struggled to continue doing what they were doing when they're head coach, and that's because there's so many more responsibilities. Sharon Moore is going to find just how difficult college football is as a head coach this season. They will likely have 2 to 3 losses already coming into our game. If they are ranked, it'll be like a low ranking, like 20s, maybe 18, 19, because they're just not going to be what they were last year. Their defense will still be physical, and we will have to wear them down. But one thing that they don't have is depth. So if they have injuries in certain key positions, that's going to be a huge problem for them, because who's going to fill in that seat? Like, who's going to, on that bench, who's going to walk in and do that? Because none of them are developed like the players that left last year. A lot of players last season on Michigan were 6, 7, or I think 6 year. I don't think they had any 7th year, but with the COVID year in 2020, a lot of players were able to stay longer, which Michigan greatly benefited from, because a lot of these players weren't going into the NFL their 4th year, but by their 6th year, with a national championship under their belt, they were able to get drafted, and they did play well under Jim Harbaugh. But those players are gone, those 6-year players. You can't tell me that a 2nd-year player or even a 3rd-year player is going to be just as good as a 6-year player. I don't buy it. There's just no way. So, that's a huge problem for Michigan. Obviously, they're going to try and throw their best game at us, but like I said, they don't have the coaching staff. They don't have the same offensive line. They don't have the skill players. They never did anyways. their philosophy is a little different, anyways. But without all of those key things, and with a quarterback that I think is going to be mostly inept, there's just no way. This year, Ryan Day gets his revenge. So Ohio State will be 12-0. Now it's hard to predict who will play. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's going to be Oregon for sure." I don't think so. I think Oregon will have 2 or 3 losses. I think Penn State gets through this season with 1 loss all year. I could be wrong. Tomorrow they play West Virginia. If they get upset, I'll immediately be wrong because they're going to lose to West Virginia and us. But I think they'll get by West Virginia. Their defense is too good. I think their running game and physical attack is something West Virginia is not used to. West Virginia is supposed to have a really good quarterback that does help. But, again, skill position players at West Virginia aren't to the level that they are in a team like Ohio State. So I think Penn State gets through this season with only 1 loss. And so I think we'll play Penn State a second time. I'm probably the only person picking this. There are potential games that would ruin that. One of them being UCLA. UCLA is a little bit more like a Big Ten school than the other Pac-12 schools. The other being USC. They do go to USC. USC will not have a defense. I think their defense will be better than last year, but that's not saying much. But without a solid defense, Penn State will win that game. Wisconsin figures to be a better team this year, so they could upset Penn State. So, yeah, Penn State has some tough games, but, Maryland, they have Washington, they have USC, Wisconsin, and UCLA, and, of course, us. I think Penn State has 1 loss all season. And I think we end up playing Penn State. That's a surprise pick. That's my pick. So Ohio State, Penn State for the national championship game. And it's going to be much the same, in my opinion, as the first game, except it's in Indiana. I think it's still in Indianapolis. I'll have to look that up. So I can't really preview that game because it's not for sure going to happen. But that's my pick. I think we are going to go into the playoffs undefeated. Playoffs are harder to pick right now. I think I do foresee us in the national championship game. I think most people would expect it to be Georgia. I think so too. So it's kind of hard to say. That game will be a toss-up. I will talk about that if it happens in the future. If it doesn't happen, I still think we're going to be undefeated going into the playoffs. And so this will be an interesting year. So 12-0 is my pick for the season. That probably doesn't shock anyone. But this year, there's a lot of merit behind my pick. Again, Ohio State has more talent than anybody in the country, even Georgia, in my opinion. And so if they put it together on the field, this could be our national championship team that we've been waiting for. But it just depends on how it, comes together. Well, I'm sorry that none of my friends joined this podcast. I will work out in the future for them to try and come again, hopefully next week. But I got a late start because I had technical issues, and next week it'll be up and running already. So I appreciate everyone that's tuned in. I just want to say thank you, and I hope many of you will like and subscribe to my channel. I'm just, I'm unknown right now. I'm just kind of getting this going again. And, if you watch me, if you like me, maybe interact with me, I would appreciate it. So like, subscribe, share, let people know about me. Maybe even if you do subscribe to my channel, maybe you'll be on here with me discussing the game. That's what I hope to do in the future. So, just subscribe, leave a comment, help the algorithm say, hey, this guy at least has some people starting to view him. Usually I get more views after the video is released than live. But, I would really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm just getting started. I appreciate everybody. I also encourage everybody to check out Buckeye Scoop, the Ohio podcast, and Buck on Juck. Juck on Bucks, I said that backwards. If Juck ever hears that, he'll laugh. But anyways, Juck on Bucks, I recommend those channels. Also, the Ohio podcast has an alternate channel, and Mello is a good friend of mine, so is Devin. So check them out as well. They're very knowledgeable, probably more so than I am. So they're really good 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 sources to listen to. Bello's pretty well connected, so he knows what he's talking about. So I do recommend checking out all those Buckeye channels. But of course, I hope you listen to me as well. I'm not in competition with anybody. I'm just doing this for fun. But thank you so much. Everybody have a good day and go Buckeyes. Tomorrow we'll be 1-0 by by 7 p.m. So everybody look forward to that. Everyone have a great day. Thank you so much and go.